Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. What you're about to witness is a tale that reminds us how a single moment of recognition can change someone's entire world. On a brisk Philadelphia morning, Michael Davis stood at his usual corner, his weathered hands moving swiftly across a large sketch pad. The early autumn wind rustled loose papers around his feet, each one bearing the faces of strangers he'd captured in charcoal and pencil. For 3 years, this corner had been his gallery, his studio, and his escape. The 26-year-old artist had grown up watching basketball in these very streets, dreaming not of playing, but of capturing the raw energy and emotion of the game through his art. His father, Robert Davis, had always told him that art was a waste of time, that he needed a real job to survive. But Michael couldn't help himself. The streets of Philadelphia held too many stories that needed to be told through his sketches. Every morning, he would set up his makeshift studio, a folding chair, a large sketch pad on a worn easel, and a tackle box filled with pencils, charcoal, and erasers. His hands were always stained with graphite, marking him as clearly as any uniform would. Some days, he barely made enough to cover his bus fare home, but he kept coming back, driven by a passion that even he couldn't fully explain. Today was different, though. Michael had been working since dawn on a special piece, one that had been forming in his mind for months. It was a portrait of Allen Iverson, not as he appeared on basketball cards or in sports magazines, but as Michael had always seen him, a symbol of Philadelphia's heart and resilience. The artist's fingers moved with unusual certainty, as if they had been waiting years to tell this particular story. The morning crowd flowed around him like a river around a stone, most people too busy with their daily commute to notice the artwork taking shape. A few regular passers-by, Sandra Williams, who worked at the corner cafe, and Thomas Clark, who ran the newsstand, would occasionally glance over, having watched this particular piece evolve since sunrise. What none of them knew, what Michael himself couldn't have guessed, was that this ordinary morning was about to become one of those moments that reshape a life's trajectory. The kind of moment that reminds us that sometimes the universe has a peculiar way of bringing the right people together at exactly the right time. The drawing was different from his usual quick sketches. This one had depth, showing Iverson not just as a basketball player, but as a cultural icon. The artist had captured something in the eyes, a defiance, a strength that spoke of more than just athletic prowess. It told the story of a city, of struggle, of triumph against odds that seemed insurmountable. Jennifer Thompson, a local teacher who often stopped to watch Michael work, paused longer than usual that morning. "There's something special about this." She said, dropping a few dollars in his collection cup. Michael just nodded, too focused on getting the details right to engage in his usual friendly banter. The morning light was hitting its peak when Michael noticed a change in the crowd's energy. People were slowing down, phones were being pulled out, whispers were starting to circulate, but he remained focused on his work, adding the final touches to the intricate cornrows in his drawing, making sure each line spoke of the authenticity that had made Iverson not just a player, but a revolution. The artist was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice the figure that had stopped behind him, didn't register the growing crowd of onlookers, didn't realize that the very subject of his drawing was standing just feet away, watching his own story unfold through the hands of a stranger. This moment, frozen in time like the charcoal lines on Michael's paper, was about to become one of those stories that people tell for years. A reminder that in a world of chaos and rushing crowds, real recognition can happen in the most unexpected ways. It was about to become a testament to the power of seeing someone not just as they are, but as they inspire others to be. The people gathering around could feel it. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The regular flow of the morning commute had been disrupted by an energy that was almost electric. Even those who didn't recognize the significance of what was unfolding could sense that they were about to witness something special. Stay tuned to see how this chance encounter between an NBA legend and a street artist becomes something neither of them could have expected, and learn why sometimes the most powerful moments of recognition come when we least expect them. Don't forget to like and subscribe to catch the next part of this incredible story of art, basketball, and the unexpected ways our paths cross with those who inspire us. The morning had reached that perfect moment when the sun's warmth finally cut through Philadelphia's autumn chill. Michael Davis was lost in the final details of his drawing, his hands moving with the certainty of someone who had spent countless hours studying his subject. What he didn't realize was that his subject was now studying him. Allen Iverson had been walking these streets for years, even after retirement, but something about this morning felt different. He had noticed the growing crowd from a block away, the kind of gathering that usually made him want to turn and walk the other direction. But today, curiosity got the better of him. Sarah Williams, a longtime resident who ran the coffee cart nearby, was the first to spot Iverson. Her quiet gasp caught the attention of others, creating a ripple of recognition through the growing crowd. But somehow, Michael remained oblivious, completely absorbed in his work. His face showed the kind of focus that Iverson himself would have recognized, the look of someone completely in their element. Richard Anderson, a local business owner who had watched Michael work this corner for years, stood quietly observing the scene unfold. He had seen plenty of street artists come and go, but there was something different about Michael's dedication, about the way he showed up every day, regardless of weather or recognition. The drawing itself was unlike anything Michael had done before. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a story told through details. The way he had captured Iverson's eyes spoke of more than just likeness. It showed understanding. The artist had somehow managed to convey not just how Iverson looked, but what he meant to Philadelphia. James Thompson, a young basketball coach from the neighborhood community center, had stopped to watch earlier that morning. He was still there, now witnessing something he would later describe as one of those moments you know you'll be telling your grandkids about. The way the crowd naturally formed a semicircle around the artist and his subject created an almost theatrical atmosphere. Iverson moved closer, his steps quiet despite the growing murmurs around him. The portrait was nearly complete, and from his vantage point, he could see every detail Michael had poured into it. The cornrows were perfect, yes, but it was more than that. The artist had captured something in his expression that Iverson himself had seen only in rare photographs, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability that had defined not just his career, but his life. The morning traffic continued to flow around them, creating a strange island of stillness in the middle of urban chaos. Linda Miller, who worked at the bank across the street, had stepped outside to see what was causing the commotion. She found herself unable to leave, caught up in the anticipation of what would happen when the artist finally noticed who was standing behind him. Michael's hands moved with practiced precision, adding the final touches to the signature tattoos that had become as much a part of Iverson's identity as his crossover. Each line was drawn with the respect of someone who understood that these marks told stories, that they were more than just ink on skin. The crowd had grown larger now, but remained surprisingly quiet. Phones were raised to capture the moment, but there was an unspoken agreement not to disrupt what was unfolding. Even those who normally would have rushed to get an autograph or a selfie seemed to understand that they were witnessing something. In the demanded respect. Charles Thomas, a veteran street vendor who had seen everything these streets had to offer, later said he had never felt anything quite like the energy of that moment. It was as if the whole block was holding its breath, waiting to see how this unexpected encounter would play out. Michael was adding the final shadows to the drawing when he noticed the change in lighting. Someone was standing behind him, casting a shadow across his work. He'd gotten used to people watching him draw, but something about this presence felt different. The artist paused, his hand hovering over the paper as he slowly began to realize that the whispers around him had taken on a different tone. Patricia Martinez, a teacher from the nearby elementary school, had stopped with her morning coffee to watch Michael work, as she often did. She would later tell her students that some moments in life seem orchestrated by fate itself, and this was one of them. The way the morning light hit the drawing, the way the crowd had gathered, the perfect timing of it all. It felt almost scripted, except no script could have captured the genuine emotion of what was about to happen. The artist's first realization that something was different came from the reflection in his tackle box. Among the distorted images in its metal surface, he caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette, one he had spent hours studying, one he had just spent the morning recreating on paper. His hand froze mid-stroke, his mind trying to process what. His eyes were telling him the morning sun had reached its full strength now, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. In any other circumstance, Michael would have been concerned about the light affecting his work, but in this moment, all his artistic considerations faded into the background. His heart began to race as he slowly turned to look over his shoulder. Crowd watched in anticipation as the artist's eyes widened with recognition. The moment stretched out like a held breath, time seeming to slow down as Michael Davis came face to face with Allen Iverson. Not on television, not in a photograph, but right here on his corner, standing before his makeshift studio. What happened next would be recounted differently by different witnesses, but all would agree on one thing: the genuine humanity of the moment. There was no pretense, no practiced celebrity interaction, just two people connected by art and respect, meeting in the most unexpected of circumstances. Robert Wilson, who had been walking to work when he stumbled upon the scene, would later post online about how the whole thing felt like watching a movie in real time. The way the artist's expression changed from shock to disbelief to something approaching awe, while Iverson stood there with a hint of a smile, appreciating not just the artwork, but the dedication it represented. The morning traffic continued to flow around them, car horns and city noise creating a backdrop to this moment of connection. But for those gathered around, it felt like being in the eye of a storm, a pocket of perfect stillness surrounded by the usual chaos of city life. Stay tuned to see what happens when an NBA legend meets the artist who captured not just his image, but his essence, and learn why sometimes the most powerful connections come from being seen, not just as we are, but as we inspire others to be. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to catch the next part of this extraordinary story. The Philadelphia morning had become a stage for something extraordinary. Michael Davis, the street artist who had spent years perfecting his craft on this corner, found himself looking up at Allen Iverson, the very man whose spirit he had been trying to capture on paper just moments before. The crowd held its collective breath, watching two worlds intersect in the most unexpected way. "You got my tattoos right," were Iverson's first words, spoken with a hint of amusement and genuine appreciation. His voice carried the familiar South Virginia drawl that Philadelphia had come to love, but there was something more intimate about hearing it here, on the street, rather than through a microphone or on television. William Thomas, who had been walking to his job at the local community center, pulled out his phone to record the moment, but found himself too captivated to press the button. Later, he would describe how the interaction felt too authentic, too human, to be reduced to a viral video. Michael stood slowly, his hands still stained with charcoal, trying to find words that seemed to have escaped him. The drawing pad on his easel now stood between them like a bridge, connecting their two very different worlds through art. The portrait seemed to take on new life with its subject standing beside it, as if the artwork itself was holding its breath. "I've been working on this for weeks," Michael finally managed to say, his voice steady despite his racing heart, studying photographs, watching old games, trying to get it right. The honesty in his voice struck a chord with Iverson, who had spent his entire career being analyzed and portrayed by others, not always with such care and understanding. Sandra Martinez, a regular passerby who had watched Michael work this corner for years, noticed how Iverson's attention kept returning to specific details in the drawing. It wasn't just the accuracy of his features that seemed to interest him, but the way the artist had captured something deeper, the spirit of determination that had made him a legend. "You didn't just draw what you saw," Iverson said, stepping closer to examine the details. "You drew what it meant." His words carried weight, acknowledging not just the technical skill, but the emotional understanding behind the artwork. The crowd around them had grown larger, but maintained a respectful distance, sensing the significance of the moment. Michael Davis had always believed that art was about more than just recreating images. It was about capturing essence, telling stories, conveying meaning. Now, standing before someone whose story he had tried so hard to tell, he found himself understanding his own work in a new way. Jennifer Clark, a local art teacher who often stopped to watch Michael work, observed how the conversation between the artist and the athlete flowed naturally into something deeper than just a discussion about a drawing. They began talking about Philadelphia, about struggle, about the way certain moments in life define us. "See this part here?" Iverson pointed to a detail in the drawing where Michael had captured a particular intensity in his eyes. "That's the look my mama used to tell me about. Said it's what got me through." The personal revelation sparked murmurs of appreciation from the crowd, who were witnessing a side of their hometown hero rarely seen in interviews or on the court. The morning sun had risen higher, casting shorter shadows now, but nobody in the growing crowd seemed to notice the time passing. Elizabeth White, who worked at the coffee shop across the street, had brought out cups of coffee for both men, creating an even more intimate atmosphere in the midst of the public setting. As Iverson studied the artwork, he began sharing stories about some of the moments Michael had captured in the details, the significance of certain tattoos, the meaning behind specific expressions. Each revelation added layers of meaning to the portrait, transforming it from a mere likeness into a collaborative storytelling piece. "You know what makes this different?" Iverson asked, addressing not just Michael, but the gathered crowd. "Most people draw what they think they see. You drew what you understood." The distinction wasn't lost on anyone present, least of all Michael, whose years of studying his subject had led to this moment of validation. David Smith, a young basketball player from the neighborhood who had stopped on his way to practice, watched in awe as Iverson began pointing out specific details in the drawing that connected to moments in his career. Each explanation added depth to the artwork, turning it into a living history lesson about resilience, determination, and staying true to oneself. The interaction between them had taken on an almost mentorship quality, with Iverson sharing insights about his journey while Michael explained his artistic process. It was a masterclass in both basketball history and artistic interpretation, witnessed by an increasingly moved audience. "People always think it's about the games, the scores, the highlights," Iverson continued, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "But you got something else here. You got the story behind all that." His words resonated with everyone present, reminding them that beneath every public figure, every celebrated athlete, there's a human story waiting to be understood. Margaret Thompson, who had been recording the entire interaction on her phone, noticed how both men seemed to grow more comfortable with each passing moment. The initial awe had given way to genuine connection, turning what could have been a brief celebrity encounter into something far more meaningful. Michael found himself sharing his own story about growing up watching Iverson play, about choosing art over more conventional paths, about the daily struggle to pursue his passion despite skepticism from others. To everyone's surprise, Iverson listened intently, nodding in recognition of a different kind of fight, but one he understood well. "You know what this corner reminds me of?" Iverson asked, gesturing to Michael's modest setup. "The practice court, where I used to shoot hoops all day. People would walk by, probably thinking I was wasting my time. But that's where the real work happens, when nobody's watching, when you're just doing it because you have to, because it's who you are." The parallel between their experiences struck a chord with everyone present. Robert Harris, a local business owner who had often questioned the wisdom of Michael's chosen path, found himself re-evaluating his assumptions about what constitutes meaningful work. As the conversation continued, it became clear that this chance encounter was affecting both men in profound ways. Iverson's appreciation for the artwork had evolved into respect for the artist's dedication, while Michael's admiration for his subject had deepened through their personal connection. "You want to know the real reason this drawing works?" Iverson asked, turning to address the crowd but keeping his focus on Michael. "Because you didn't just try to copy what you saw. You put in the time to understand the story. That's what practice is really about. Not just repeating something, but understanding it deep down." The word practice brought smiles to many faces in the crowd, remembering Iverson's famous press conference. But here, on this street corner, the word took on new meaning, connecting the disciplined repetition of an athlete with the dedicated practice of an artist. Stay tuned for the final chapter of this incredible story, where we'll see how this unexpected encounter transforms both lives and reminds us all that recognition, when it comes from a place of genuine understanding, has the power to validate not just what we do, but who we are. Don't forget to subscribe to catch the conclusion of this remarkable tale of art, athletics, and authentic connection. As the Philadelphia morning stretched toward noon, what had begun as a chance encounter between an NBA legend and a street artist had evolved into something far more significant. The crowd that had gathered to witness the initial interaction now found themselves part of a moment that would resonate far beyond this corner. Allen Iverson stood looking at the drawing one more in time, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "This isn't just about today," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decision. "This is about recognizing real talent, real dedication." He turned to Michael Davis, who was still trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. Nancy Brown, who had been live streaming the entire interaction for her local arts blog, captured what happened next. Iverson didn't just offer to buy the drawing. He offered to commission a series of pieces for a new community center he was helping to establish in the city. But more than that, he wanted Michael to teach art classes there, to show kids that there are many ways to tell their stories. "You know what I see in this drawing?" Iverson asked, addressing the crowd, but looking directly at Michael. "I see Philadelphia. Not just me, but all of it. The struggle, the pride, the never giving up part. That's what these kids need to learn. That's what art can do." Thomas Wilson, the director of the local youth program, stepped forward from the crowd. He had been watching the entire interaction unfold and saw an opportunity to create something lasting. "We've been trying to find ways to keep kids engaged after school," he said. "Art and basketball, that's a combination that could really work." The impact of the moment began to ripple outward. Sarah Martinez, who taught at the nearby high school, was already thinking about how to incorporate this story into her lessons about perseverance and following one's passion. The way these two different paths, art and athletics, had intersected so perfectly provided a powerful message about the unexpected ways dreams can be realized. Michael found his voice again, stronger now. All these years on this corner, he said, I've been trying to show people that art isn't just about making pretty pictures, it's about telling stories that matter. Iverson nodded in understanding, recognizing in the artist's words the same drive that had pushed him through countless practices and games. Barbara Williams, who owned the building next to Michael's corner, stepped forward with an announcement of her own. She had been watching him work for years and had been considering renovating her empty storefront. It's time this talent had a proper studio, she said, a place where these stories can be told. The morning had become a catalyst for change, but not in the way anyone might have expected. James Anderson, a local business owner who had previously dismissed Michael's presence as just another street artist, now saw something different. He began talking with other community leaders about creating an arts district, using this corner as its heart. Iverson's attention returned to specific details in the drawing. You see these shadows here? He asked, pointing to particular areas. In the portrait, that's where you captured the real story. Not in the obvious parts, but in the spaces in between. That's where the truth lives. His observation seemed to speak to something larger than just artistic technique. The crowd had thinned somewhat, but those who remained were witnessing something powerful, the birth of a partnership that would influence the community for years to come. Linda Thompson, a social worker who worked with at-risk youth, could already envision how this combination of sports and arts could create new opportunities for expression and growth. When I was playing, Iverson continued, everyone focused on the obvious stuff, the crossover, the scoring, but the real story was in everything else, the practice, the preparation, the passion. That's what you've captured here. That's what we need to teach these kids. Michael Davis looked around at his corner, seeing it with new eyes. What had been his outdoor studio for years would now become part of a larger narrative. Richard Clark, a documentary filmmaker who happened to be passing by, had captured the entire interaction and could already see how this story would resonate with audiences everywhere. The practical details began to take shape. Elizabeth Garcia, an arts council member who had been drawn to the commotion, started making calls about funding and support. The momentum of the moment was building into something concrete, something that would last beyond this extraordinary morning. You know what practice really means? Iverson asked, returning to a theme that had run through their entire conversation. It's not about doing the same thing over and over. It's about believing in something so much that you'll do whatever it takes to get it right. I see that in your art, in the way you've been out here every day, telling these stories. Sandra Johnson, who ran the community newsletter, was already composing the headline in her mind. This wasn't just about a chance meeting between an athlete and an artist. It was about how authentic recognition can validate years of unseen dedication and transform it into something that benefits an entire community. As the conversation continued, plans expanded. Michael Miller, a local architect who had stopped to watch, began sketching ideas for how the community center's art space could be designed. The morning's inspiration was quickly becoming tomorrow's reality. Here's what people need to understand, Iverson said, addressing everyone present. Success isn't just about talent. It's about staying true to who you are, even when nobody else sees the vision. You've been out here every day, rain or shine, telling these stories through your art. That's what excellence looks like. The impact of his words wasn't lost on anyone, especially the young people in the crowd. Matthew Robinson, a teenager who had been considering giving up his own artistic pursuits, found new inspiration in seeing how dedication could lead to unexpected opportunities. As the morning drew to a close, the significance of what had transpired became clear. This wasn't just about art or basketball or even success. It was about recognition, about seeing the value in someone's dedication and helping to elevate it to its full potential. Sometimes, Iverson said as he prepared to leave, the greatest achievements come from being exactly who you are, even when the world wants you to be something else. You've been true to your art, true to these streets, true to the stories you wanted to tell. That's what this collaboration is going to be about, helping others find their truth and tell their stories. The crowd had largely dispersed now, but the energy of the morning remained. Joseph Martin, who had witnessed everything from his newspaper stand, summed it up best. In all my years on this corner, I've never seen anything quite like this. Two completely different worlds coming together, creating something new. As Iverson and Michael exchanged contact information and finalized plans for the future, the significance of the morning settled over the street like a blessing. This corner, which had been Michael's canvas for so long, would now become something more, a symbol of how dedication, authenticity, and unexpected connections can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The story of the street artist and the basketball legend would be told many times in the days and years to come, but those who were there that morning knew they had witnessed something special, a moment when recognition met dedication, when art met athletics, when past met future, and when two different paths converged to create something extraordinary. If you've been moved by this story, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that dedication always matters, that authentic recognition can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful connections happen when we stay true to who we are, no matter what corner of the world we occupy. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories about the unexpected ways lives intersect and dreams take flight. And remember, whether you're practicing your jump shot or perfecting your brushstroke, excellence isn't just about the end result. It's about showing up every day, telling your truth, and being ready when your moment comes.